Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Charlie and this is Cover to Cover. Today we're going to be doing a wrap up of the books I read in May. I ended up reading 8 books, which I'm super proud of because I had the most hectic month known to man and I didn't always have the most amount of time to read. But yeah, let's get into it. The first book I read this month was A Marvellous Light by Freya Marske. Now I've seen this all over Booktube and TikTok, and when I tell you I had high expectations, they were real high. And honestly, it did not disappoint. It's queer, there's magic, there's a little bit of history thrown in there. I mean, like, what's there not to love? So we follow our 2 protagonists who are called Robin and Edwin, and one of them is magic and one of them isn't, and they have to solve this mystery. When I tell you, I just smiled throughout this book. Like, it made me feel so light and happy. It gets a little raunchy at times, which we love, but all in good taste, of course. The next book I read this month was The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. And I got this from my friend at work, and this is one of her favorite books. She studied it at school, and so I thought, great, why not? The plot follows 2 men and 2 women and a dog in the 1960s and 70s in Czech Republic. Honestly, this wasn't for me. I found this a little too intellectual for my reading tastes, and honestly, I don't want to spend time talking about it. I get why some people love it, and I'm sure if you dissect it like you do at school, there's beauty in it and it all makes sense, but from just reading it, I wasn't a fan. And overall, I just found it really hard to get through. Like, I was not motivated to read this book at all. So sorry, Sabina, about that. Moving on. The next book I read this month was Finlay Donovan is Killing It by El Cosimano. And honestly, El Cosimano killed it. After reading my last book, it was so refreshing reading an easy book. And honestly, I just loved it. I couldn't put it down. I read it literally within a day. The plot of the story is Finlay Donovan is a single mum and she is a crime writer. And so she's struggling to keep her life afloat. She's in the process of writing a new book whilst having to look after her child, and she goes to a meeting with her agent, and a woman next to them overhears what Finlay is talking about and thinks that she is an assassin, but she's not. But the promise of a large amount of money makes Finlay weigh up her options. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it, but it was honestly just so refreshing to read. It was such a page turner, and I loved how human she was. She wasn't good at everything that she was doing, and she was struggling. Like, parts of this book I was stressed not because it was a mystery, but because of Finlay's actions. But overall, I think that made it for a really humbling and nice book. So overall, a definite read, 4 stars. The next book I read this month was Almond by Won-Pyung, and this was translated from the Korean by Sandy Joo-sun Lee. And this was the best book I read this month, hands down. 5 stars. It was phenomenal. I can just say that the ending left me in tears in Nando's, which wasn't a good sight, but honestly, the writing, they are such a phenomenal author. So we follow the character of Young Jae, who is a child born with alexithymia, which makes it hard for him to feel emotions like fear or anger. And that's caused by a small gland, I believe, in the brain that is the shape of an almond. He grows up with his mum and grandma, and they look after him and help him with social situations. So they teach him responses to things. For example, if someone tells him he's hurt their feelings, he is taught to say, "I'm sorry." He doesn't feel like he needs to say, "I'm sorry," but he's taught that that is the appropriate response. And so his grandma and his mum look after him until a random act of violence changes his world. And that scene in particular was harrowing. So after the event, Young Jae retreats into himself and becomes very isolated until he meets another student called Gon. And Gon is essentially the opposite of Young Jae. Gon feels too much. He's had a very hard life so far and he doesn't know what to do with all of his emotions. So it's very interesting reading their stories and how they oppose each other so much, but that brings them ultimately together. The book is written from Young Jae's point of view, so it's super conversational, which makes it like a really quick read, which I love. The prose are beautiful, and the way they deal with some of the harrowing experiences is really well done. Overall, a 5-star. Read it. The next book I read this month was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Now, I feel like I may be the last person in the world to have read this book, as I see it everywhere. I mean, I see Colleen Hoover everywhere in general, and this is the first book I've read of hers. And honestly, I didn't love it. I'm sorry. I feel like I might get some hate for this. The book is advertised as a love triangle, but the focus really is more about domestic abuse. I think the issue for me is that it's been rated so highly that I had real high expectations for it, and it just didn't deliver. I found parts of it just a bit on the nose. For example, her name is Bloom and she wants to own a flower shop. Like, really? Really? Are we not going to try like a bit harder? And in general, I found the characters not fully flushed out all the time. The fact that she falls for him in the first place, he's the definition of a walking red flag. I will say that the ending of this book is really good, and I also did love the diary entries that she writes to Ellen, but overall I just found it to be a fine book, so I gave it 3 stars. The next book I read this month was Death of a Bookseller by Alice Slater, and I actually listened to this on audio, and it was narrated by Emma Noakes and Victoria Blunt. And first of all, I need to give them a shout out because the acting was fantastic, the voices were so great. The story is set in a bookstore in Walthamstow, and we follow the 2 colleagues of the bookstore. One of them who is like a true crime fanatic and is very obsessive over several types of murders, and the other one whose mother was actually a victim of a serial killer. I've never read a book quite like this, and it was dark, mysterious, yet cozy at the same time. As a true crime lover, it was really interesting reading from Laura's point of view, because I've never probably thought about it, but how harrowing it must feel to, first of all, go through this traumatic experience of your mum being murdered by a serial killer, but then also having your story plastered all over the world and other people profiting from it. I found it was like a really interesting take. Now, I rated this book 4 stars, not 5, purely for the fact that I wish the ending had gone a slightly different way, not to give anything away. But overall, it was a fantastic book, and I would highly recommend people reading it. The next book I read this month was In the Dream House by Carmen Machado. Now, this has been on my TBR for a good 6 months, and I don't know why I've never just got round to reading it. Oh my good God, this broke my heart. This memoir is a super brave telling of Carmen Machado's life. It focuses on the psychological side of domestic abuse. She tackles the feeling of growing up as an outsider and not wanting to perpetrate the stereotypes that society have put on you, her being a queer woman. And what I think the book does so well is there's lots of graphic and awful psychological abuse storied in here. However, the way that she writes is so lyrical and beautiful, it's kind of masked within the story, which I think is a comment in itself. This book certainly lived up to the hype, and I would definitely recommend reading it. And finally, the final book I read this month was Greek Lessons by Kang, and this was translated by Deborah Smith and Emily Ye Won. can we just appreciate how gorgeous this book is? Like, come on. So pretty. I saw it walking past Foyles on my way to work, and I was like, I need it. But it cost me £17. £17 for a book is so expensive, especially for a book that's so short. So that's not good. But we move past that. I love Kang already. The Vegetarian is one of my favourite books, and this didn't disappoint. It was a 4-star read, not a 5-star read, but overall I didn't put it down and I read it in 2 sittings. So the story is set in Seoul, and we follow 2 characters, one of them being a Greek teacher and the other one being one of his adult students. And she has lost the ability to speak, and he is losing his eyesight day by day. And they are basically bonded together through the trauma that they're both currently facing. But I'll read a quick little bit from the blurb. Greek Lessons tells the story of 2 ordinary people brought together at a moment of private anguish. The fading light of a man losing his vision, meeting the silence of a woman who has lost her language. Yet these are the very things that draw them to one another. Slowly, the 2 discover a profound sense of unity, their voices intersecting with startling beauty as they move from darkness to light, from silence to expression. I mean, come on, that's gorgeous. The writing in this is stunning. I feel like everything that Kang writes is so intentional. Everything always has like a second meaning. And I could not put this book down. I would highly recommend everyone reading it. And I think it might have just come out, so I feel like there's probably going to be a fair amount of hype for this book, which would be well deserved. And that is the end of my monthly wrap up for May. Overall, not a bad month. I mean, we only had 1 5-star, but we had 4 4-stars as well, so that's pretty good, I think. If you liked this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up, a comment, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'm still kind of new to Booktube, so I'm still working things out, but the more I hear from everyone, the better. If you have any book recommendations for me that you think I would love, then please tell me, and I hope you have a lovely day. I will see you in the next video. Bye!